Hi everybody, my name is Max Maker and today I'm going to build a stand for this bandsaw right here. Because if you're standing on a table, if you hit the back of the wall, you can't cut anymore. So it needs to be freestanding somewhere in the middle, but obviously I want it mobile so I can move it away if I don't use it. So I started by making a little sketch just with the basic dimensions. I'm going to put some drawers in there. On top is going to be a piece of really thick plywood that I have left over. And I'm going to make all of this from these aluminium profiles because I use them for work and I have some scrap pieces left over with holes in them, so I can't use them on customer work anymore, but they're still good profiles and maybe you can learn a little bit about how to use these profiles and the pros and cons of them. So to cut these profiles to length, I always use my miter saw and I install a stop block. That ensures that you really get exactly the same size on all of these, and it's much easier than measuring each one of them. You just slide them up to the stop block and then make the cut and you have the perfect length. Aluminium is really soft, so you can easily cut it with a carbide tipped saw blade. And what I use to connect these pieces together is just threads in the ends, and then I use screws to go through the profile and into these threads. That's what I found is the best way to connect them, and I use one of these spiral cutters. They're much better than the one at the bottom, especially if your hole is rather square than round, like these ones are. And yeah, you see here, I just put some screws in, screw them in, and that's a really secure and tight connection. Much better than all of these corner connectors. You know, they're much more expensive and they're fiddly to use. I use them later on so you see the difference between them. But I found this is just the easiest way, and you know, drilling these holes in here isn't big of a deal. And just a few minutes later I had these two used, so it's really fast to assemble this stuff. And now I need some braces at the top, so the same thing, set up a stop block, put them in, cut them to length, then tap the ends and attach them with screws. And I was lucky that some of these profiles already had the holes at the right position. If you want to buy this stuff, it's often easier to just buy them on eBay in form of a already assembled frame from some kind of industry company, you know. They use them for something that they don't need the tool anymore, and you just buy the whole thing and you get lots of this stuff for really cheap. One disadvantage of using through holes is that sometimes screws are interfering. Here for example I could only insert one screw, otherwise they would have had to go through the other screws that are already there. And this is one of these 90-degree corner connectors, and they work but they're not very stable and they're really fiddly to get in. They have tiny grub screws that hold it in place, but overall it's a little bit wonky, so they hold them in place, but you need really a lot of them to make a stable connection. Instead of making boxes out of plywood, I'm going to use these boxes from the hardware store. They're really cheap and they're convenient. I save a lot of time by just using them. And this frame is not that stable yet, it racks a little bit, and that's because of these corner connectors, but I couldn't use a different one down here. So what I'm going to do is change these rectangles into triangles by adding these braces here. And these are also leftover pieces from other projects. It's really nice to get rid of all these scraps. And I cut these pieces on the bandsaw and then I sanded them down and rounded over the edges on the grinding wheel. To attach these I have two options. On the left I've got a T-nut and a normal insert nut. And the T-nuts on the left are really good because you can insert them from the top of the profile. You don't need to slide them in all the way from the end. You just drop them into place, and then if you twist them they interlock with the profile, and it's very convenient because here I can't access the ends of the profile. So if you've got the choice I would use always the T-nuts if you're ordering some. And to stop these two pieces of aluminium from rattling in the middle, I inserted this little rivet that hold them together really tight. And this really made the frame super stiff, as you can see before and after. Only the carpet is moving here, not the frame. I once assembled about 20 tables for a restaurant, and I had these feet left over from the project because I didn't use them, and they're perfect because they're the same thread size as the profiles and you can use them to level the whole thing. And to slide these boxes in and out I used these profiles and I just added them with these T-nuts again. Very convenient, and you can slide them up and down if you want to change the size of the boxes. So for the top I had this really big piece of plywood. This was also scrap. I bought this from my local lumberyard. They have this section behind their saw where they keep all the good stuff that they didn't sell. And I got this for super cheap. This is 32mm Baltic birch plywood, so the best stuff you can get. And to attach this to the frame I just drilled some holes for some screws later on. But first I'm going to round over all the edges with this router lift that Crackjig has sent me. This is a super cool tool. It's all made from solid aluminium and it's really stiff and very convenient to have. I think the black matches the aluminium much better than the natural color of plywood. For screws I always use Torx bits because they are much easier to screw in because you don't have to apply that much pressure from the back. The bit slips in really deep and applies a lot of force, so you can't really strip these screws. And I also added some diagonals on the outside to stiffen up this plane as well. I'm so happy that I used so many leftover materials for this project. In a sense, I already had this bandsaw stand, it just wasn't assembled yet. I even had this cross brace left over. I applied some silicone to hold down the bottom shelf. This doesn't take a lot of force, but it stops it from slipping around. These boxes just cost €5 each, and it's not worth making a drawer for this kind of price, especially if it's just for the workshop. I'm going to screw the bandsaw straight into this piece of wood with some threaded holes, and you can use a regular metal cutting bit to cut threads in plywood. And as I mentioned earlier, I want this base to be mobile, but I can't add wheels to the bottom of it because it's too heavy and it would be too tippy, especially if it's this tall, but I can use a hand truck to move it around really easily. And here you also see the mobile cart that I made for my bandsaw. It's very convenient to just drive this onto the driveway, do my cuts on the outside so the dust isn't in my workshop, and then I can cart it back inside. So there we go, a really functional and sturdy bandsaw base. I'm quite happy with this. I've got these scrap bins for aluminium and one for wood. Works really well. And I hope you guys were entertained by this video and you learned a little bit about the pros and cons of using these aluminium profiles. This was all done in preparation for my brand new workshop that I'm going to move in later this year. And if you're curious about that, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter and support me on Patreon, and of course subscribe to this channel. I really appreciate it. If you want some more videos to watch, check out these ones. I'm building an electric hydrofoil right now, but unfortunately I have some electronics issues, so it's a little bit delayed. But I guess I'm going to be on the water within a month or so. As always, I hope this video inspired you to make something yourself today. My name is Max Maker and I make all kinds of stuff.